in today's video I'll be talking about the sequel to Godzilla 2014, Godzilla King of the Monsters from 2019. I saw this in the movie theaters when it came out. This movie was also on the mixed response, but honestly, in my own opinion, I enjoyed it. I had a blast with this one. Not saying this is great or a masterpiece. This is the third legendary MonsterVerse and a follow-up sequel to Godzilla 2014, but only brought back certain characters from the first movie. Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen are not in this movie, but they brought back Ken Watanabe and Sally Hawkins. They basically established new characters in this movie. This one was fun and entertaining. Just like I said in my last video, I saw Godzilla 2014 when it came out or when school got out. I saw this in the movie theaters when I just graduated from college, Suffolk County Community College. Good timing. This movie also came out around the same time as Avengers Endgame, the final time when Robert Downey Jr. played Iron Man. This movie is directed by Michael Dougherty. I'm not sure I'm saying his name right. It was not directed by Gareth Edwards this time. Michael Dougherty did movies with Bryan Singer. He also directed horror movies like Trick or Treat and Krampus, and he also co-wrote Superman Returns and some of the X-Men movies. Funny to see on the last movie, Bryan Cranton was in the last movie because of his popularity as Walter White in Breaking Bad. In this movie, they got Millie Bobby Brown, who was big and popular for the Netflix TV show Stranger Things around this period. I guess the producers and writers have a thing about actors who were popular on TV shows at that time to have these American Godzilla movies. The part when she was trying to make breakfast and she burns breakfast, I was making a joke in my head, Stranger Things, make Eggos as backup. This movie is like an American remake of Destroy All Monsters, with decent, like, hit-or-miss written characters, however you want to put that in. And on a bigger budget, it also felt like a loose remake to Ghidorah Three-Headed Monster. From watching this movie, you can see where they took inspiration from this movie from like other past Godzilla movies from different eras. Whether you agree or disagree with me on this one, this is probably almost close for an American Godzilla movie to be in the spirit of a Toho movie, at least for this. I could change my mind Lord knows how many years from now when they make another American Godzilla movie. Just like in Destroy All Monsters, this is the kind of movie people just want to see the monsters fight each other, and maybe some people might be into the characters, but it depends on the individual. In my opinion, this movie is a decent mix of monsters and human drama characters, but the human characters in this movie are just alright in this movie, but I'll explain more on this later in a few minutes. But this is a slight significant upgrade from the first movie to some degree. We see a little more Godzilla in this movie. He appears early in the movie. Godzilla really kicked ass in this movie. The movie opens up with a little brief recap from the first movie, where the family's point of view lost their son in the Godzilla attacks. Then it fast forwards a few years later. The parents are divorced and not been the same since their son died. It also mentions how Godzilla has not been seen the last 5 years. You can basically say Godzilla was in hibernation. Godzilla fights familiar giant monster we see for the first time in an American Godzilla movie. He fights King Ghidorah, Mothra, and Rodan, the all-star lineup. They reference King Ghidorah as Monster Zero from Ghidorah Three-Headed Monster, but until they call him by his real name later in the movie. His look of Ghidorah was badass than ever we've ever seen him before. He looked more like a dragon than we've ever seen in previous ones before Godzilla movies. They kept King Ghidorah's origin story the same to some degree, but with small slight tweaks. He's an alien from outer space. That's it. No other explanation right there. Rodan looked cool and Mothra looked cool too. Mothra was very glowy, colorful, and shiny. Mothra was the good guys usually like in past movies. It's one of the rare times I've seen Godzilla and Mothra, good guys, in the same movie together team up and fight the giant monsters. Rodan flies and destroys buildings. Rodan really looks very scary in this movie compared to previous versions of Rodan. It looked like something out of a Jurassic Park movie. Mothra kicks Rodan's ass and owns him. If they had focused a little more on the other monsters that Godzilla fights in this movie that I'm not familiar with, you have a very long movie, then an intermission, or a part 2 continuation of this movie's storyline. It was hard getting used to see the monsters were CGI, not practical effects, but they used CGI a little bit in the Millennium Toho Godzilla series. I like how they reference King Kong in this movie for the setup for the next one, but it's not explained as well as I thought it would be. I thought the after credits scene would have had King Kong for a cameo or a King Kong roar, if you know what I mean. The movie did some good cinematography, Godzilla breathing atomic breath and shooting up in the air, and again, the fight scenes. There was a homage to the first one when Dr. Serizawa sacrificed himself using the Octo Destroyer on Godzilla. But the difference is, the Oxygen Destroyer helps Godzilla regain his strength, does not kill him. I don't know why, I like the part when Dr. Serizawa looks at Godzilla and helps a creation he made despite the consequence of the disaster he caused in the last movie. In a weird way, it was kind of heartbreaking. Compared to the last movie, Dr. Serizawa did not much to offer like he did in this movie. Like I said in my last video, he was nothing like the original Dr. Serizawa from the 1954 Godzilla movie. In the last movie, he was just there, that's it. They also probably didn't want to rehash too much of the original Dr. Serizawa. Instead, they probably wanted to try to make their own different version of Dr. Serizawa for this movie. As I said before, we do see more Godzilla in this movie. People say he died in this movie, but honestly, he was not dead. He just didn't have much energy. He was just resting. Oh, I'm not quite dead. I was just resting. But after getting the oxygen destroyed by Dr. Serizawa, he comes out all juiced up like he was on steroids. Just like the first movie is another metaphor for a natural disaster, tsunami, earthquake, and hurricanes. People running away to get to safety and shelter from the natural disasters. The one that surprised, they used the original Godzilla theme music by the original Akira Ifukube score. I don't think that was possible with all the license and legal issues. But just like Shin Godzilla, they had that balance of old Godzilla music and new music. Music Lights is very OCD and money-making. Fear for me as an actor, I've enjoyed watching it since I saw in The Departed. I loved in The Orphan. That movie really scared me. Up in the Air, the first Conjuring movie, and the other Conjuring movie she did. Her character in this movie was so horrible and sadistic, not meaning her acting is bad, it was the kind of character you're supposed to dislike. She was a villain in this movie and a second antagonist. From her introduction, we thought her character was the good person, but then you find out that she's bad, that she was responsible for all these disasters. But it's weird despite she had a reason for doing what she was doing because of the death of her son, but at the same time, it was wrong what she was doing, teaming up with an evil organization to control the monsters, and then she was going to save the world. She tries to redeem herself in the end, but everything still got a balance when the monsters attacked, and did the usual destroying the buildings. The damage was done. Everything was tainted at that point. When her character dies, if she had lived, she'd probably be in jail, never seen the light of day again. Her dying was her redemption. She was also the reason why Godzilla fought every giant monster. While she does an okay job, you make the argument that her character villain is not as well written as it could have been. There is potential, but not given a proper writing justice arc. You can also say when her character dies, it was not a loss. Despite her sacrifice, it was a redemption in the end. Millie Bobby Brown is a good actress. I liked her as Eleven on Stranger Things, but I feel like I don't give her much to do in this movie. Heck, I don't remember what her character's name was in this movie, to be honest. Her character could have been tweaked a little bit more. You can say her character was being followed in the wrong direction, had no idea what her mom was planning her up to. She had a choice between her and her father, but her complicated relationship with her parents is not explored as well as I want it to be. For some reason, I did like the part when she pretends to rub her eyes and gives the bad guy the middle finger. Kyle Chandler's character was likable and sympathetic. You felt like he was never the same person after his son's death, and you root for him to get his daughter back when he finds out his ex-wife's evil plans. He had the best arc of this movie. I like the scenes with him and Dr. Serizawa's scenes together, despite how Serizawa's creation of Godzilla killed his son. But he learns from him how to make peace with Godzilla in a weird, strange way. Charles Dance from Game of Thrones, Last Action Hero in Alien 3 plays a forgetful villain, and sometimes even forget that he's even in this movie. Again, there is potential, but he needed more development. He is a good actor, I've seen him in a lot of good things, but it's not his fault, it's the writers. He was more of a supporting villain because Emma was more the main villain in this movie than he was. The after credits scene shows it was not the last we've seen of him. He will probably and hope be safe for another Godzilla movie where there's more to this villain and he will have a bigger, better role. Even though the characters were good, a little better written in this movie compared to the first movie, but just like Shin Godzilla, they crammed so many different minor characters into one that we don't get a chance to know or connect with these small minor characters. But they do focus on main ones that we are drawn to somewhat to a certain degree, but it depends on the person. Miles Dice from Terminator 2 shows up for a brief second that he's never seen or mentioned again. For what I've heard, he was the same character from Kong Skull Island, but as an older man. I honestly did not see the connection when I first saw this movie. I thought it was just some random character that was thrown at the last minute. Bradley Whitford, who is a good actor, you might recognize him from Get Out the Horror movie by Jordan Peele, and has been in a lot of other good things. It was kind of annoying in this movie. I'm not sure that was intentional or not. He has some bad one-liners. The writers tried too hard to make him funny. The twin characters, Dr. Eileen and Lin Chen, played by Jiang Zi. I know I'm probably not saying her name right, I apologize for that. From Rush Hour 2 and Ang Lee's Couch and Tiger Hidden Dragon. This is a reference to modernization of the twin fairies in the previous Mothra movies. I did not realize she played two different characters and not see the connection. They reference Infant Island from the first Mothra movie where Mothra is from. They're not twin fairies like they were in the original. They are research scientists who discovered Mothra, and that was the connection to Mothra. It has a lot of dialogue information on monsters and science. Don't get me wrong. I love good dialogue in movies, but in this, it's like, am I expecting to remember all the scientific terms? This isn't a science school class. This is a movie of Godzilla. I'm not going to be a scientist or be a doctor after watching this movie. After all, I just want to see Godzilla kick ass and fight giant monsters. The dialogue was hit or miss. It had good dialogue and sometimes boring dialogue sometimes. Just like in the 2014 Godzilla movie, they fight in the dark and in the rain, but Godzilla does fight King Ghidorah in the Arctic. At least that was a change of scenery. In the last movie was pitch black, it was hard to tell what was going on in the fight scenes, but at least this was a slightly improved the visibility, make it a little bit easier, better to see to some degree. Also, in the last movie, we didn't see many fight scenes, like I said in the last movie. Just when we thought we were going to see a Godzilla fight a giant monster, but then it cuts away, it's like, damn it. In this, we got to see more fight scenes this time, but in one part we see Godzilla fighting King Ghidorah, throwing punches at each other, but then it cuts away to an airplane, or it cuts to random people talking. It's like, wait a minute, why can't we see more Godzilla fighting King Ghidorah? They cut away what could have been a cool epic fights between Godzilla and King Ghidorah. In total Godzilla movie, we see them fight until one wins or loses, or Godzilla kills the monster. But sometimes they do cut away to the human character, but not constantly every 5 seconds. King Ghidorah is always covered in hurricane shots. Even though Mothra and Rodan are in this movie, we don't see that much until the end. Rodan had some cool scene shots taking out jet airplanes. When Mothra dies, he turns to dust and uses the spear to revive Godzilla. Just like in GMK or other Godzilla and Mothra movies. They reference Godzilla vs. Destroyer when Godzilla looks like he's about to go into meltdown. Again, I did not see the connection until I saw fans point that out. And the last movie took place in between Honolulu and Las Vegas. This event happened in Boston. I can't think of one other giant monster movie that happened in Boston. When King Ghidorah lands, he destroys Boston like a tsunami. Just like in Destroy All Monsters, the final battle showdown was awesome, cool, and epic. Did not expect Rodan to be bad and teams up with King Ghidorah, but I liked all the fight scenes from every scene. The CGI is not bad. I still wish they were using practical effects like in the Toho Godzilla movies. I still wish it was guy in rubber suits. It was nice the end credits said RIP to Haruo Nakajima, the original Godzilla actor. Again, I'm probably not saying his name right. I apologize for that. What doesn't make any sense, they call this movie King of the Monsters. Then they use that title right when they distributed the original 1954 Japanese Godzilla movie. Before I end this video, here are my friend Christian's thoughts on Godzilla King of the Monsters from 2019. Not only does he talk about Godzilla King of the Monsters, he also briefly touches upon on Kong Skull Island, which I already reviewed last year for my King Kong videos with my dad.
So, as much as I think Kong Skull Island is technically the best of the MonsterVerse, the reason I'm not doing a review of that is I know for this particular series of videos that John's doing, I think he's mainly focusing on Godzilla, but I will say Kong Skull Island I think is the best of the MonsterVerse. That being said, King of the Monsters is my personal favorite of the MonsterVerse. I think more than any other film in the MonsterVerse, this is one that really does feel like a big-budgeted Hollywood version of a Toho film. This really does feel like an American take on the kinds of movies that Toho was doing in the late 60s and early 70s. I also think this movie is the perfect amalgamation of the serious Godzilla and the campy Godzilla, because the movie certainly is silly at points, but the characters within the movie do take the situation seriously, and there also is some serious social commentary in the film about climate change and what we're doing to the environment. Also, I love this movie's take on King Ghidorah. This might actually be one of the scariest takes on this character, because in this movie, Ghidorah really is the harbinger of the apocalypse. And in a way, he almost represents Satan in the film, because in a way you could almost look at Ghidorah in this film as being a literal interpretation of that multi-headed dragon that, according to the Book of Revelations, is supposed to appear on Earth during the end times. And again, while this certainly is a silly film, it does have these interesting environmental and even religious undertones. The movie also feels kind of like Michael Daughtry's fan fiction in a way, because the film throws so many different references to the entire Godzilla franchise. It almost overloads the movie with references. Like, it just throws all these references at the wall and sees what sticks. But that doesn't bother me. I really did love this film.
It wasn't a perfect movie, but I did enjoy it. I had a lot of fun with this movie, and I found a slight improvement to 2014's Godzilla. It still had some flaws, but it's not stopping me from still enjoying the movie and appreciate it for what it was. This is also the kind of movie not to be taken seriously. You're just supposed to sit back, relax, chill, and watch Godzilla fight giant monsters. It was also a love letter to Godzilla to some degree. If you're a diehard Godzilla fan, you might enjoy this. If not, skip this one. Watch other Godzilla movies before watching this one. Chris Stuckman said it well, saying how the characters feel Russian are like robots, and are not as realistic as we want them to be. For me personally, I did not hate or love this movie. I didn't give a lot of hate or flack like a lot of people did. The point of this movie is to set up the next big fight, and that is a remake to Godzilla vs. King Kong, two iconic giant monsters. See you next time.